Today, we're digging into a source that argues a major political realignment is underway in Australia. We're talking about a reality check for the conservative side of politics, which, according to this analysis, is facing a pretty formidable new challenger. Let's get right into it.
So the big question our source material is really asking is this. Is the very ground of Australian politics shifting right under our feet? The argument is that what used to be a predictable two-horse race, well, it's now way more complicated, and it's forcing some established parties to face some really uncomfortable truths.
So first up, let's unpack the predicament facing the incumbent Conservative Party. The source we're looking at doesn't just call it a challenge, it frames it as a full-blown reality check.
Okay, so the core argument here is that the Liberal Party can't just assume it's the default home for conservatives anymore. For years, right, it operated as this broad church, trying to be everything to everyone. But, the source argues, in doing that, it's kind of neglected its right-leaning base and left this big political vacuum. And whenever there's a vacuum in politics, something or someone rushes in to fill it. And that's where this other political force comes in. Our source spends a lot of time analyzing the rise of One Nation and digging into why its appeal seems to be surging.
This really lays it all out, doesn't it? It's a tale of two parties. The source paints the Liberals as a party that's struggling to determine who they are. But on the flip side, it describes One Nation and its leader Pauline Hanson as unapologetically conservative. The argument is that this perceived difference in, conviction is what's really driving this political shift.
And boom, this quote right here really hammers that point home. It's used to crystallize this whole idea of authenticity. See, the argument isn't about whether you agree with the policies. It's about the perception that One Nation's leader is a conviction politician, that she operates from a consistent worldview, and that's something voters are supposedly craving.
Okay, so that's the story the source is telling. But what about the numbers to back it up? Well, this is where things get really interesting. The source points to some polling data, and honestly, some of these figures are pretty eye-opening.
First up, let's look at data from a recent state election in South Australia. Here, One Nation reportedly pulled in almost a quarter of the primary vote. That put them in second place, behind only the winning Labour Party. The source presents this as a massive signal that the party is becoming a major electoral force to be reckoned with.
Now, this is where it gets genuinely surprising. When you break down the polling by generation, the data suggests One Nation is actually the leading party for Millennials, with 30% of the first preference vote. Think about that. That's ahead of Labour, and more than double the support for the established Liberal National Coalition.
And it's not just a one-off thing with Millennials. The pattern continues with Gen X. According to this data, the support is even stronger here, with One Nation leading at 32%. Again, way ahead of the coalition. This really challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom about where these demographics are putting their votes.
And when you put it all together and look at the overall polling, well, here's the big picture. This specific polling shows One Nation just 2 points behind Labour and a full 8 points ahead of the coalition. So the source is painting a picture of a really dramatic shift in the political landscape here.
So you see numbers like that, and you have to wonder, right? How is the Liberal leadership responding to all this? Well, according to our source material, the reaction has been, less than effective. And it highlights a couple of key examples. First, we've got this quote. And it's a classic argument, you've probably heard it before, only we can form a government, so a vote for anyone else is basically a wasted vote. It's a plea for strategic voting, really, trying to urge voters to just stick with the major party on the right. And then you get a comment like this from another Liberal figure. The source really zooms in on that phrase, people don't understand what they're doing. And it interprets that as a deeply problematic message to be sending to the very voters you're trying to win back. And yeah, the source does not pull any punches in its critique. It flat out labels these kinds of responses as clueless and condescending. The argument is pretty simple. Telling voters they're mistaken or that they just don't get it is the exact opposite of what you should be doing to fix the underlying problem. All of this brings us to the source's final conclusion. Faced with this rising challenger and what it calls a totally flawed response, it presents a stark choice for the conservative movement, what we're calling the humble pie ultimatum. So what's the solution on the table? According to this analysis, it's pretty straightforward. To avoid splitting the conservative vote and pretty much handing victory to their opponents, the parties on the right have to cooperate. That either means a formal coalition or, at the absolute minimum, a strategic preference deal to pool their votes. And really, it all comes down to this one powerful line from the source. The call is for the established Liberal National Coalition to eat a large serving of humble pie,
to just accept the reality that the balance of power has shifted and they are no longer the only game in town. Which leaves us right here with this final critical question. Based on everything we've just looked at, will the conservative forces in Australia adapt to this new reality and maybe form a broader alliance? Or is the movement just destined to stay fractured, which could pave the way for its political opponents? It's a question that could define the future of Australian politics.